So welcome to the Freedom Fridays project with me, your host Pete Clark, the Whispers guy. So welcome to episode 10. This week, for the first time, has been a nothing week. Literally nothing. I don't know whether it's because I'm lazy, I've forgotten, I've been too busy. You know, those times when you feel like you're too busy to stop and get petrol. It's been a little bit manic with things going on at work and at home that I just have made no notes. Zero, nothing, nada. So for the first time, my little journal that I usually daily, if not every second day, make some notes about what's happened during the week. It's blank. It's absolutely blank. Not that my head's been blank, but my notes have been blank. So as I've reflected on that, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to just reflect and maybe a little bit of a ramble on what that means or could mean for me. And then serendipitously, it gives me a chance to catch up on the next week. As always, from a recording perspective, a couple of weeks behind. And so what I'll do is I'll just clump two into one. So my nothing week, what does it tell me? A couple of things. It tells me, it reinforces for me the ebb and flow of life. You know, sometimes when you're really on and things are going smashing, great, brilliant, everything you touch turns to gold. And then the opposite happens. You know, you spill a coffee on your clothes, and you know the key breaks in the lock, and you get a parking ticket, and then you get an unexplained bill, and you get some trolling on the internet. You know, whatever it is, it just seems to reinforce this ebb and flow. And the temptation, of course, is to fight it, which is probably my default. And as I've mentioned before, part of the value I'm getting out of recording these podcasts is it's really testing me to let go. As I read and I watched years ago the Hollywood movie Evan Almighty, and he's a corporate executive, and he has an epiphany, and he pretends he's Noah and builds an ark, and of course his wife's a little bit perturbed by that, and she's in a cafe. And of course, being Hollywood, she's served by a waiter, Morgan Freeman, who happens to be God. And she talks to him and says, "Oh, I wish I had more patience." And of course, being Morgan Freeman in his voice, he says, "Don't wish for more patience. Wish for more opportunities to practice patience." So that's what it's been a little bit like for me. This is a great opportunity for me to practice letting go and surrendering and allowing that week just to be a nothing week. It also reinforces a little bit of the nature of the work that I'm involved in, the sector that I'm involved in. It's a little bit feast and famine. You get dozens of opportunities all at the one time, and there's been many times when, you know, 4 or 5 clients have requested the same day of all things. And obviously I can't be in 5 places at once. So that's an interesting energy flow where everything's coming together to pick the same day, whereas on the other occasions it's a bit of a famine. It's like, you know, the tumbleweeds are going, the emails aren't coming, the calls aren't coming. You know, if I shouted, it feels like I'd be an echo chamber. So it reinforces the feast and famine of the nature of the work that I do. And as I ramble on and think about that, a question for me to ponder, not necessarily answer, but just to ponder: is that what I want? Is that really what I want in the next 10 years? Can I cope with that mentally, physically, emotionally, financially? And I don't know the answer to that, but that's certainly something I'll be pondering. It also struck me that how easily distracted I can be. I had a conversation with someone recently, and they described my way of being, a part of it anyway, as a little bit of a magpie, meaning I'm picking up a little bit here, a little bit there. I'm reading that chapter of a book, that page, this quote, and I kind of bring it all together in this meshy, mushy thing and somehow turn it into an insight, hopefully for you, but certainly for me, and how easily distracted I am by the novel and the new and the quirky and the thing that strikes me and speaks to me, how easy I get distracted. And yet also how easy it is to get back on track. I remember a colleague suggesting that, if you're going to do 20 minutes exercise a day and you have the odd day where you don't do it, there's no point catastrophizing and giving up and say, well, I haven't been consistent, because you're actually only one press up, one 20-minute session, one podcast, one page of notes away from being back on track. And whilst you might be starting at one again, we're all allowed a mulligan, we're all allowed a little bit of tolerance, I think, in the ebb and flow of life. And so that was a good reminder for me to I'm only 20 minutes, I'm only one page of notes from being back on track. And so as I think about this week, I'm a little bit nervous because I've committed to do something on Fridays. June and July, I've committed to develop my own skill, develop my own practice and mastery, and I've invested money and time, and it's on a Friday morning. And so I'm committing to that. Partly because it's an easy way to commit by putting something in my diary, spending some money on it and saying I'm not available. But I'm nervous because I'm kind of catapulting into the future. I'm probably more someone who thinks through time than in time. And I'm thinking through time, what if I get work? What if I get a big piece of work and the client says, well, you've got to do this day? And what if I can't do that work? What if I say, a little bit selfishly, no, I'm not doing it because I've got this Freedom Fridays project happening. I may just have to deal with it at the time. And my nervousness is also influenced by my thought, what if it's not worth it? What if the investment I'm making hasn't been worth it? And it reminded me of something that I came across years ago. And this is maybe something to ponder for all of us. And it's the premise that being really conscious of, is what you're doing worth what it's doing to you? Is what you're doing worth what it's doing to you? And it might seem like the most obvious thing to do right now, but longer term, through time, is it actually worth what it's doing to you? So, on the positive side, if you're doing the exercise, if you're sleeping well, if you're hydrating, if you're, getting into flow, if you're allowing yourself to play, is that worth what it's doing to you, making you more creative, more inspired, more connected? You could probably argue yes. And yet on the counter side, the long hours, the constant working, the constant screen time, the constant always trying to iterate to the next level, is that really worth what it's doing to you, which is making you perhaps less connected or less centered or less present? And I'm really conscious in this nothing week prior to this week. I immersed myself in work, which partly was comforting. I was bathed in constant opportunity for work and distinctions and conversations, which part of me loved, but part of me is also in this little Pete Clark on my shoulder saying, yeah, and you know what? I'm not sure you can do that forever. Certainly not for 10 years, certainly not for a year, certainly not for... And as I put myself back in time to kind of go, I can probably last a couple of weeks. Probably a couple of weeks is about my limit. So that was something that I felt was informative from this week, my commitment to blocking out the Fridays, and is that going to be worth what it's going to do to me? No doubt the development will be helpful in many ways, but will I be able to cope and navigate the probable stress and dilemma that I'll face in doing so? So that's been my last couple of weeks. I hope you've enjoyed that. If you get any feedback, please let me know. That's my fuel, and I look forward to seeing you on the next podcast. Cheers.